Hello, hello. Thank you so much for joining us on the Sweet Bytes with Sandra podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Sandra Colton-Medici, and this is the first time I've actually talked with Shivani face to face, if that's what we can call this. But you have to tell me how you say your last name so I can pronounce it correctly. Oh, you're muted. Hold on, you're muted.
It's Ekkanath.
Ekanath?
Yes, yes.
Woo! Okay. My guest is Shivani Ekkanath, and she is actually a student and journalist. And I came across some of her work when I was looking around on the internet because I dig a lot. And she had an article about social audio. And so I wanted to talk today about what I titled the episode is Audio Bytes, because there's so many different players in the game now that it can get a little bit overwhelming, a little bit confusing as to maybe which platform is the best for you. And so let's talk with Shivani. If you have any questions, we can take them at the end. But for the purposes of this conversation, I am the student here. Even though I have been on a few different platforms myself, I've been on Twitter Spaces, Clubhouse, and most recently, Spotify Green Room, right? That one I hadn't even known about. So let's talk about some of your experiences with social audio and what you kind of have, like your opinion on just the medium.
Initially I was honestly, Sandra, I was as shocked as you were because I didn't really know the potential and scope that it could possibly have. And I think during the pandemic, Clubhouse was something that really took off. And even then, there wasn't as much buzz about social audio, I think, till then. So for the article I did for Make Use of, I downloaded Spotify Green Room for the first time. It was the first social audio app that I ever downloaded. I had no clue what it was, but again, I was quite shocked by just the fact that it existed and it wasn't really something that a lot of people knew about, right? And I still believe that the platform is on beta status, but it's still sort of getting a lot of attention. And I sort of tried playing around with it, joining rooms, kind of digging as well, because I was just really, really curious. And yeah, so like what I know about social audio is that it is sort of, again, a form of social media in which sort of people communicate via audio or like a share app. So like, like you were saying, chat rooms, but with sort of live conversations happening, especially when we're talking about Spotify Green Room, as well as um, Clubhouse. So it's not via text or video, which is what makes it very unique and different from Instagram or Facebook, obviously. And then think about it, like there's so many like big people who have been on Clubhouse. I believe Van Jones, Jared Leto, Drake, Elon Musk. Elon Musk, in fact, I thought it was really funny that he sent a Clubhouse invite to the Russian president Vladimir Putin, and there was just like a lot of buzz that was created around some of these big celebrities and like big world leaders being so closely associated with the platform, right? And I just think that there's so much potential for it. When I was on Spotify Green Room, I was like, you have the potential to for live audio rooms, podcasting, sound bites. So there's just more avenues there for content, and there's so many ways to just create more content as well as immerse ourselves in like yet more media. It's sort of like this social audio, I would say, sort of like this cultural sounding board that sort of just gives us even more access to knowledge and information in just so many creative ways. And I also think that what is really cool about it, especially with platforms such as Clubhouse, is that it can be just this opportunity and avenue for content creators and like performers to sort of engage with their express and share their content in another way. So we have TikTok, but TikTok is obviously a very different genre of content creation and sharing. So it's just, again, another I would say way in which we can do that. And I also know that apart from Clubhouse and Green Room, I was doing a lot of research on this. There's like multiple social audio platforms. I think there've also been independent creators. There's one called Quilt, I believe. And I think there's also a lot of social audio sort of features on Facebook as well as Twitter. And it sort of seems like it's a race to see who gets there first, if it's Clubhouse, if it's big tech, or if it's sort of independent platforms. So I think the market's looking pretty interesting right now, and I would sort of want to see maybe in a couple of years who sort of at the top, especially because Facebook is sort of in this game right now, and like you have big tech as well, sort of wanting to capitalize on this opportunity. So yeah, that is basically how I got involved and kind of engaged with the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, so you mentioned Spotify, and I think I was reading your article, and that's my first introduction to Spotify Green Room. And when I went on to Spotify Green Room, I was struck because I kind of was like, is there anybody here? You know what I mean? Like I thought, like, in the kind of sequence of their app, there's a lot of rooms, right? And you have to kind of pick a genre. There's very, like, it's very limited, kind of the genres that you can kind of jump into, like business, music. I mean, they're very broad categories, I would say. But I thought what was very interesting is that they basically have, like, one of the genres is Anchor, right? Is like the podcast platform that they own. And so people who are getting into podcasting have this, like, direct link to Spotify Green Room. And then the other part that I thought was really amazing was that the majority of rooms that I have come across, because I've only been
Yeah,
on it for a few weeks or so,
yeah,
are music rooms, right?
yeah,
And when I get into, like, Clubhouse or even Twitter Spaces, a lot of those are really conversation heavy.
yeah,
And this was music heavy. And some of the rooms that I would get into, it was like named like 24/7, club
yeah,
hits, something like that. And it
yeah,
literally would go 24
yeah,
7. And I'm like, I've only heard of a few Clubhouse rooms going for
yeah,
24 hours. And really, they had moderators come in and change hosts, and like, it was kind of a rotation. This was like people were sending their music
yeah,
to the host, and then they were getting their music played on Spotify. So it was almost like this, like, indie music route to get heard. And I thought that was like a whole other beast that's not being capitalized on any of the other platforms.
yeah. Yeah, I think what's really like I feel like with Clubhouse, it still sort of operates in this era of exclusivity. That's like you have an invite, you have to be an expert. But I think that's what's making it both sort of very interesting. It has this like sort of new exclusivity feature, but also it's like not as accessible to people as well because you would need an invite. And I think I remember I was on Spotify Green Room and I was just kind of playing around and I just hopped onto a live 24/7 chat session on a basketball game, and I was like, I'm not really into sports in general, and I would never really be into listening to basketball for like 24 hours. But yeah, I again just thought that it's just a more informal, it's just a lot more accessible to people, and I just think, yeah, it sort of just operates under a less exclusive, sort of unofficial sort of structure versus I feel like Clubhouse is a bit more high stakes with regard to who can come in. And yeah, as you said, that I think that Anchor, that's a really really interesting feature that I also found. But yeah, I think all of these sort of operate as social audio, but I think that the audiences and the people that they will eventually end up reaching might be pretty different. And I think that considering Spotify Green Room is still at beta testing and it's still sort of coming up, I think it'll take a few years or like for us to really see what happens, or it might completely die down. Who knows?
Yeah, you never know which ones are going to actually, like, fall off, just because
Yeah,
the height of Clubhouse was really because people were craving connection during the
yeah,
beginning of pandemic, right?
yeah,
But the pandemic is still here, And you had mentioned one called Quilt, and I actually was on Quilt
yeah,
from from early stages, and I found it to be very different than Clubhouse because their mission was not to be talking about business. It was not to necessarily be talking about people in a negative way.
yeah,
It was literally founded, I think, to offer support and be somewhere where people could go, like, in the moment to talk
yeah,
about their feelings. And I'm forgetting, I think it's Rumor Willis, I think, actually had a podcast, and she brought on, I think it was a psychic at one point, to talk about different things that maybe she was going through or other people were going through. I think she had a friend who was having a baby, and, like, I was
yeah,
like, there are people on there who are in like kind of like celebrity realm, who are just coming on because it's a different kind of platform. But I had mentioned that I was going to ask you a few questions just in like in a different format. So as a journalist, what do you find as far as social audio to be a good way for to connect with sources, or to gain insight into subjects that you might be interested in profiling for an article?
Yeah, so I've relied on podcasts a lot for my research. And I'm definitely podcasts are something I love listening to. I just feel they're such a great way to get information, engage with content. And yeah, I'm sort of an avid reader of the news, so I listen to the New York Times daily podcast every single day. And what I like about it is that they cover podcasts, especially like when news media, when there's they do podcasts, they do these like daily podcasts, there's always like a lot of analysis, and they sort of go into stories that aren't really covered by mainstream news. So I like that podcasts have sort of offered that avenue where people can kind of talk about interesting conversations that are don't really grace headlines usually. And I think yeah, that's super interesting because they really and I think a lot of podcasting and a lot of these conversations, especially when you think about Clubhouse, they happen between experts on a specific topic. So it really sort of drives that, like that value of content and knowledge is extremely high because you're talking to someone who's an expert at something. And I think also what is really cool about social audio is that people can listen versus I feel like it sort of creates it's a lot more powerful in a way when someone is talking about an issue versus you reading it and sort of just getting bogged down by words and like headlines and like going on a news site. So I think definitely, yeah, I've really gotten a lot of more content, like a lot more out of it, and like sort of had an opportunity to listen to a lot more expert analysis. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you're on Berkeley campus, right?
Yes.
So I can imagine the kinds of conversations you're having with students who are, because I used to, I mean, even after I went to college, I still lived semi close to different college campuses.
Yeah.
And the innovation, the conversations, the fearlessness of
Yeah.
students, is something that is what people really want to tap all the time. They want to be like, I need to be in the mix. And so I can just imagine what kind of conversations you're having with
Yeah.
different colleagues of yours, different, faculty members who are like literally doing the social listening that we all say that we're doing, but literally on the ground to hear what the concerns are, what the, thought processes are of, what Gen Z,
Yeah.
millennials, whatever the youngerest of generations are, and when you think about some differences that you see in like social audio platforms, which one do you think has the longevity?
I would say considering um from all of the ones that I've like tried and like read about, I do think Clubhouse, especially now, Clubhouse really, really took off in the pandemic, and I think it sort of is that trailblazing force of social audio, honestly. And it's what's really cool is that sort of Clubhouse rooms are like divided into these sections for like speakers and listeners, and there's like a live conversation happening, right? And we're sort of able to share, and like I think on most social audio platforms, you're sort of able to share and express that knowledge, and it's a very also unique form of content that we're not that exposed to. And I feel that just because Clubhouse was the first that really has put it in the game quite a bit. And I think also because you can engage with audience members as experts, it also lends a lot of credibility because there's that air of exclusivity. And I think people want to be a part of that conversation, people want to be heard, people have FOMO, so people want to be included. And I think Clubhouse can has really capitalized on that. And like a lot of people, I remember once I was like talking to a housemate of mine, and they were saying, oh my god, I'm on Clubhouse, I got an invite. And I was like, you need an invite to join? And it just seemed like something very cool. I'm like, oh, no one's ever gonna give me an invite. So I think that line of thinking is something that's really helping Clubhouse, and it's sort of just especially because it's social audio, and I think this is sort of something that's ubiquitous along all platforms. It sort of represents this, like you said, opportunity for social connection and empathy, having conversations about like language, world issues, and without that sort of a very image focused and image centered sort of mindset that we have around Facebook and Instagram, where we are sort of presenting ourselves in a way, versus these are more authentic expressions of human beings, I think, when you're like talking and listening to people. And I think I remember, I think I was reading about it. That was a conversation that was happening with Palestinian refugees talking about their experiences, and that garnered like a huge sort of audience, back when that conflict was sort of really gracing headlines. And I think a lot of people engaged with that and got to like learn more about the problem. So I think, yeah, like hearing something from these refugees, hearing something from people definitely generates a lot more emotion. It's extremely powerful. um and I also think, yeah, like I said, that, and I think that platforms such as like Instagram and Telegram voice chat and Green Group are definitely sort of getting there. But I think they are sort of using the Clubhouse platform in a way to sort of, and I think they're adding something interesting. They're adding something unique. But I definitely think that just Clubhouse, their whole model is just built on something that's extremely unique. And I think that's definitely what's putting it at the top. But obviously, we'll see where that goes, because I feel like a lot of Clubhouse and like a lot of Clubhouse clones and like all of these other platforms are just trying to one up each other. But I definitely do feel like um, big tech and Facebook and Twitter might not be as successful as achieving success here. I think so personally, and I think platforms such as Quilt and more independent platforms might be winning the game, or might win the game. I don't know. It's
You
just
never know. I mean, it is kind of all up to, what 2022
yeah,
brings, because I think that because we were in the pandemic, what, early March 2020, most people were in quarantine, lockdown,
yeah,
whatever situation that country
yeah,
was in, right? And so it was an immediate shift to, well, I need to talk to someone.
exactly.
And that shift now, I think people are in this great resignation period of, I have talked to myself, and myself is telling me I don't need this particular job or whatever it is. And so when you think about the conversation, it's
Yeah,
almost like we might need to follow the shift in how people are talking to find out
yeah,
what's going to be the next mainstay. And I've listened, right? I've listened to all the, like, the differences that's happening with big technology, whether it's Facebook turning into Meta,
yeah,
you know, in live shopping being something that's offered on TikTok, and YouTube having shorts, to compete with TikTok, or, all of the different platforms trying to figure out, how to connect. And I
yeah,
think the biggest thing that people can do to connect is stop putting out features because
yeah,
they're confusing everyone and making it harder for people to use all of these apps. And I know that a lot of research goes into it, and I'm sure you do your own research on campus as well.
yeah,
But it's really important for people to, in these kind of user experiences and user design, to
yeah.
know that the more you throw at people, the harder it is to keep up, right?
Exactly. I think it's you introduce one feature and level that up constantly, and you do it well. Focus on one thing and do it well. And I think, yeah, and I think with Clubhouse, they're focusing on one thing and they're doing it pretty well, and they're not sort of looking in other directions. But I feel Facebook and Instagram sort of Facebook just wants to do everything. And I think that's where it kind of gets a bit. And I also feel like now a lot of us, we're like a lot more aware, we're like a lot more conscious, we're a lot more cognizant of our information, our privacy, and are less willing to sort of trust as well like we used to. And I think that sort of consciousness is definitely something that might deter and like not, from this maybe social audio from Facebook from further advancing. But we definitely have to see. Yeah, but personally, I don't really know any friends or anyone I know who uses social audio from Facebook or Twitter in any way. Yeah, I don't know, like especially like Yeah, no one's really on that train. I feel like a lot of Gen Z as well are. I think they're on the Clubhouse train, but it hasn't. They don't really know about the other platforms. Yeah.
Well, so when you open up a room, I just want, if anybody's listening that wants to know like some key points that you should know when you open up a room or pick a platform to broadcast on, what are like the key elements that you should be thinking about or considering?
Yeah, I believe the first and foremost thing is sort of like knowing your audience as well as the people that you can reach out to, because these are very, very powerful ways in which you can reach people, right? It's like audio and emotion. I think that's definitely one thing that sort of to keep in mind, like your impact as well as your potential. And I think specifically, I think Clubhouse has really been a big springboard for content creators and artists and performers, which I think is like really great. And I think that it's given them an opportunity. And I also feel that as Clubhouse in particular sort of facilitates these live conversations, ultimately it is the value of your content and the engagement of your content and your knowledge is what is sort of driving everything, versus which is why I think it is a very unique form of social media, because rather than being image focused or sort of, oh, how many likes can I get, how pretty do I look, how am I perceived, it is very, very much about your engagement as well as what you have to share with the world and what you're talking about. And I think that is very, very powerful, and it just sort of gives us, it's like hopeful because there's more value in of that information you're talking about, and it's less like um yeah, I feel like people have very short attention spans, and I think with social audio, when you're listening to people, yeah, we're definitely, you have to pay attention to them, right? And I think that's very important.
Yeah, I mean, sharpening your listening skills for sure.
Yeah.
Are there any hosts that you recommend following on any of the social audio platforms that you think, people would be interested in following?
Um, I wouldn't really recommend. I mean, I haven't listened to as many hosts on social audio platforms, but I do know that that there are a lot of activist groups and like a lot of live conversations happening. And I usually I listen to a lot of podcasts, so that's where that's the kind of social audio that I've been listening to. And I think a lot of that's the thing. So like with like Clubhouse, all of these are sort of live conversations, so like a lot of people don't have access to that. So, and like with Spotify Green Room, I've only ever really engaged with live content, and just sort of, I think back when I wrote the article as well, it was a lot less developed as it is right now. But yeah, I do know a lot of friends though who have sort of spoken about and like been invited to talk on Clubhouse and sort of interact and engage with people. So yeah, but I don't really, I haven't been on social audio platforms enough to like recommend anyone. No.
No worries. I think that the consistent hosts are changing too, because
Yeah.
when Clubhouse was, huge blockbuster, I think that people were like every day on the
Yeah.
platform, and now it's kind of dissipated where it's kind of like weekly for some people.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see who sticks around and who kind of swoops in to, gain the attention. What is your journey so that you can tell our listeners about what you've been doing on campus, what you're studying as a
Yeah.
journalist, what your goals, dreams are. I want to know about you. What are you doing right now?
Yes, so right now I'm a fourth year political science major at Berkeley. And yeah, I'm just basically finishing up my undergrad right now. Yeah, so like I've been spending this year doing a lot more writing and sort of just like getting my work out there, which is why I've been sort of also venturing more into sort of writing about technology, talking about business, because I just sort of want to also be able to, I think the intersection between technology and politics as well as information is something that I've gotten very passionate about. I also write for a campus publication at Berkeley called Berkeley Political Review, and it's sort of been a great way for me to engage and like write about what I want, because I feel like a lot of the time if it's like work or if it's like an internship, you sort of are told what to write about. And I've also just been sort of just wanting to like write about more as many topics as possible. But I'm also sort of in the process of applying to graduate school and figuring out my future, which has been a lot. And I really want to focus ultimately on policy. That's something that I'm very interested in, especially environmental justice, public health. Those are some of the policy areas that I'm quite passionate about, and I sort of hope to because I feel like when you study political science, there's less emphasis on that, and I'm sort of just working on that, and yeah, just sort of doing as much writing as possible and like figuring out the next step. So things are all over the place right now, but I think that I have somewhat of a goal that I'm working toward. And yeah, ultimately, I do want to be a journalist, though, and especially I want to focus on investigative reporting. That is the ultimate goal. We shall see how and through what means how I get there finally.
Yeah, well, I mean, getting your stuff out there while you're finishing up your degree right now is a great
Yeah.
way. I mean, I found you just through your work, so so definitely you're reaching a lot of people. But it is very important to follow what you're passionate about, and if that is, the public health aspect of things, and digging deeper and becoming, an investigative journalist, I will follow your career, because you're part of that audience that I think a lot of people are not listening to right now. A lot of businesses and big corporate entities want to talk down to or tell you what to do, and it's almost like, no, we should be listening because they know what's going on, and they see what we are kind of jaded to, right? And I say we because I'm older than you, but we are, I'm jaded to a lot of stuff because I'm in my 40s and I've seen it, I've been there, I'm kind of like, I'm over it. But you have a little bit more of a vantage point of being removed from a lot of what we've all been experienced, for a lot of years, and looking at it like, why are we doing it this way? And that's why I look at articles written by people like you and I'm like, what do you think? You know what I mean? Because like you're looking at it from a completely different vantage point, and I'm so in awe of all that you've done so far. So congratulations to you, and keep doing what you do.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I just try to. It's like a very big world out there, and I think it can sometimes be very disconcerting and very like just very scary as like a young person, sort of like navigating all of that. And yeah, there's just like a lot of this, like also like a lot happening, and we're just constantly bogged down by information and by media, especially. And I think that's like definitely and like a lot of people have burnout from that, just being bombarded with information and being told what to do constantly, like you said, like being talked down to. I think that's definitely something I experience a lot as a young person living here, because I think that yeah, that's like definitely something that I see. And yeah, I really hope that gets better, and I hope also you get less jaded. And there's yeah, I really hope we all get less jaded. I just think that this has been a very, very tough year, and there's like a lot happening politically, socially, in a global health pandemic. And I feel things are getting better, and I just hope everything's good ultimately.
Yeah. Well, one last question for you.
Yeah.
Do you see social audio transitioning into the metaverse?
Okay, so that definitely is the big question of the day, isn't it? So definitely, I think what's really when I first read about the metaverse, I was actually completely overwhelmed, and I sort of plunged into this semi existential crisis, because it's just like a lot to wrap your head around when you like think about it for the first time, right? So the experience of a metaverse is sort of highly immersive, and we're like kind of talking about blending augmented reality, virtual reality, and all of those things. They're all very abstract concepts, right? But and I do believe that sort of big tech has tried to envision metaverse. So recently, we had Mark Zuckerberg completely, like, literally rebranding Facebook, and sort of given how immersive online platforms already are, and the fact that video games and like Minecraft have also in a way shown us this sort of glimpse into what an augmented reality could look like, what an alternative reality could look like. I definitely see that metaverse is something that we could have in the future, like something at least resembling it. And I think it's quite literally the embodiment of what we would call a new type of cyberspace, I would say. is kind of my take on it. And I think that companies such as Facebook might be able to sort of offer audiences, this like shared experience of like virtual reality, almost sort of like for lack of a better word, like a pseudo parallel universe in some way. And I feel like, take an example, like maybe like from scheduling events on Facebook might be able to host your events, right? And like metaverse might have a different currency. You might be able to be someone you're not. You might be able to take on a different persona, or like be an avatar of yourself. So I think the possibilities are indeed endless. And I think, video games especially, I think, have really offered us sort of like a glimpse into what that might look like, right? And I think it's definitely an abstract and interesting concept. Do I think big tech should be leading it? I'm not very sure. I'm a little bit skeptical about that. Especially like now we all have a lot of self-awareness. We're a lot more conscious about where our information is going, what's happening to our data. The fact that big tech uses so much of surveillance-based strategy, sort of uses our sort of mind and like happiness to like profit, essentially, right? And I think that there's been so much talk about the algorithm and how it is sort of causing a lot of damage and harm. I'm not very sure about how that would materialize if we were to talk about a metaverse, like a mega, more immersive, more overwhelming version to Facebook and Instagram. That sort of, and I think what's also really interesting, I was actually having a conversation with a friend about this. Like, big tech is only becoming bigger. Facebook now owns Instagram, owns WhatsApp, and these are all platforms that used to be independent at one point. Facebook did not own Instagram 6, 7 years ago, right? And I think that's also sort of creating this like giant web of like, oh, I was on Instagram, I was on Facebook, but like now Facebook owns both. My family was on, I also use WhatsApp to communicate with my family. And like now Facebook owns all of those three platforms. So they're sort of, again, like your profile and your information is in three separate places governed by Facebook. And I think that's definitely something to like really critically examine and look like. Like we're already sort of living in this area where in this space on the internet where our information is just pretty much everywhere. So definitely I think that a metaverse, we're already sort of with like just how ubiquitous and like you can find anyone on the internet, your data is pretty much out there. I think that's definitely something that makes me already think that we're living in sort of a pseudo metaverse in a way where your information is just so open to the public. And like as for social audio, I feel like especially given the fact that the emotion and the power that social audio can have, I think it would be a great sort of complement to this very abstract idea of a metaverse. So that's sort of my take on it. I don't know if it would be, I do think it's interesting, it's abstract, but definitely the fact that big tech and Facebook have been talking about it so much, that makes me a little bit worried in a sense, and just like a little bit more sort of hesitant. And I really hope that maybe we get more information about what that might look like. And yeah, we'll see where it goes, I guess. But it's definitely something that I'm very interested to learn more about.
Yeah, me too. And you know what? I'm going to say this on this podcast just because I want it to be like in the ether. Is I have on several platforms, whether it's like when I've been using email, like Constant Contact or Hootsuite or even Facebook. And I've seen that little button that says, I want to go back to the old interface. Have you ever seen that where it's like, can I use my old dashboard? I feel like once we're in this metaverse area, there's going to be a button and it will say, go back to the old interface or something like that, because people, and I think I've seen it on Facebook too, where it's like, do I want to use the new version versus the old version? And I feel like it's that opt out. There will always have to be some sort of revert back, right? And I think that sometimes people use it because it's laid out, in a specific way. I think I've used it on Squarespace for one of my websites. Like, when you want to put a product on a e-commerce platform, maybe the layout's a little bit different on the new version and people don't get it. And so they leave that old version kind of in place. And I feel like for the metaverse, there will always be that button where people can go back. right? Because at some point it will just be as complicated as people are making social audio right now, or even
Yeah.
Instagram and the features that they're dropping like every other week, right?
Yeah.
I'm just putting that out there because I think that it has to be said that there will always be a revert back button so that
Yeah.
people can either find the data that they are missing, because I feel
Yeah.
like a lot of times it's about getting the data back, or because they don't like it anymore,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and I
So
definitely
just
think that that's important because we need autonomy and freedom over what we say and do, and I think that's definitely something that we need to think about, and I hope that people sort of respect as well. But yeah, definitely, it's a lot to wrap. It's like a very abstract thing to wrap your head around. It sort of just makes me a little bit like when I think about it, I'm like, wow, what could that look like? Um, but yeah, I just think also like you said, there's just more updates. There's just so many things happening, and I think that we're definitely moving closer and closer to that reality. But yeah, I definitely am excited to see what that might look like and what we might have in the next few years.
yes. Well, the best thing I'm looking forward to is something like the Housewives of Atlanta or like the Housewives of Beverly Hills in the metaverse. I think that's gonna be off the chain.
Yeah,
Just because they're kind of hyper characters of themselves already, and I can
yeah,
just imagine like what scripted TV, like what scripted reality is right
yeah,
now in
yeah,
the metaverse is going to be like something else. But I
yeah.
appreciate you sharing all of your insights, and I look forward to watching all of your progress in the future. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, have a really great weekend.